What's up, guys? We are back with another episode, and our guest today is arguably our most well-known, well-respected, and most influential of all the guests we've had the privilege of interviewing across our first 2 seasons. Professional, natural bodybuilder, academic, Mr. Dr. Eric Helms. Thanks for coming on.
No, it's a true privilege. Thank you.
So first of all, I'd like to kick things off. We usually ask our guests a bit about their background in terms of family, sporting interests growing up. So kick things us off with what you were like growing up. We can hear you've got a bit of an accent going on there.
I was born and bred in Auckland. What are you talking about? Actually, funny thing is I was born and bred in Oakland.
Wow.
So from Oakland to Auckland. So I'm from California originally. I was born in Oakland in '83, so I turned 40 this year. Yeah, so growing up, I was only child. Parents split up when I was real young, split my time between them. And I was really not much of an athlete growing up by any means. I was in martial arts, so my parents always thought it was useful for me to be in some type of physical discipline. Probably mainly for the discipline portion. I was a pretty scattered child. I think I was one of the ones who did not get diagnosed ADHD in the time where everyone was getting diagnosed, but probably should have been. Played a little bit of like t-ball and like pre-Little League baseball, but I was not very good. So they just stuck me in the outfield where little kids can't hit anyway, and you just like pick your nose and stand out there. But it wasn't until high school, where I moved from Oakland to a suburb of Sacramento with my mom into our uncle's house so we could get on our feet. And I ran a little bit of track, and I was pretty good at the 400 meters athletically.
Yeah. Not
great, but I was running like a 51, 52. And I played a year of football, but I was terrible because I didn't really have an athletic background. So I never really had an athletic identity, but I was okay at the 400 meters, and I was part of a really good 4x4 team. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I think looking back, if I had had the right kind of environment, encouragement, or personal connection to the sports I was playing, then I think I would have been that much better. Because, if we fast forward to me getting into strength sports and bodybuilding in my early 20s, which I absolutely fell in love with, which I'm maybe not that gifted for, what I've been able to do as a bodybuilder and strength athlete, I think, man, if I had applied that to something that maybe I had a little more talent for, like, I don't know, swimming or middle distance running, then it'd be interesting to see where my life would be. But I'm really glad that I ended up in strength sports because it's given me everything.
I remember reading somewhere that you first started lifting in 2004, so you're going on 20 years of lifting next year. So how did you first end up in the gym? What was it like? How long was it before bodybuilding and strength sports sort of piqued your interest?
It was pretty quick after I started lifting. So this is my 19th year of lifting, and I want to say mid next year, June, will be my 20-year anniversary of lifting weights, which I have to do something for that. So I started lifting in 2004. I was just turned 21, and I got into it because I needed an outlet. I was in the U.S. Air Force. I did one enlistment. That's how I was able to pay for my university. So as much as I only did one enlistment, didn't stay with it, it wasn't for me for a lot of reasons. Politically, at the time it happened, we had just invaded Iraq. And also I found I'm not that great with authority. I need to kind of do my own thing. So personality-wise, but I made a lot of great friends. It taught me a lot of discipline. It taught me that I can do hard things, which I think was really important, stepping stone to bodybuilding. It also was where I met some of the first people I trained with. So in 2004, a very close person to me, and it's more their story than mine, so I won't go into the details, had something traumatic happen to them that ended up being traumatic to me as well because of my relationship with them. But because I was in the Air Force, I could not go see them. So they were on the other side of the country.
Right.
I couldn't do anything about it. I felt powerless. And that had a really large impact on me as a young man. I had a lot of anger. And I was looking for outlets like binge drinking, self-harm.
Wow.
And that was very brief. Like I immediately knew, like, this is not sustainable. This feels better than what I'm just feeling, but it's also bad, and this is going to go down a bad pathway. So I went to my buddy Patrick, so shout out to Patrick. Not a competitive bodybuilder, but just a dude with a great physique who loved training and lived the lifestyle. And he grabbed Arnold's Encyclopedia of Modern Bodybuilding, and he said, here's what we're gonna do, I'm gonna teach you the ropes. And my very first workout, and this is not an exaggeration, was a leg day. And I think Patrick wanted to show me like here's what hardcore training is. And we'll see if you actually are down for this like you think you are. So I don't remember exactly what we all did, but I know it was a very hard leg day because we finished with deadlifts. And we did 3x10, and it was just 60 kilos. So 135, so like 61 kilos. It was in the States still. And on my third set of 10, on my last rep, my 10th rep, I tweaked my back. And I was like, I need to go outside. And I was also feeling a little queasy. And then I threw up outside. Wow. And I thought, fuck yeah. And
I'm a badass.
Well, it was like, because at the time I was looking to things that were masochistic, and harmful. So this was something that was positive, but also it pushed me to a place where I got to express some of those emotions I couldn't deal with. I'm not going to say it started balanced. I'm not going to say it started positive, but it was the best option I had. And it also had me working with someone else who was mentoring me. He taught me here's, basics here, how to get more protein in your diet. We're going to gain weight. We're going to do all these things. And that was my entrance. And the iron bug bit me real early on. And because I was training with, Encyclopedia of Modern Bodybuilding, we were doing bodybuilding training. I started looking into that. And I was like, I got on bodybuilding.com pretty early. I want to say either 04 or 05. And I was, watching the Olympia in that time. I'm seeing Ronnie Coleman. But it wouldn't be another year or so after I got out of the Air Force. Once I started as a personal trainer, like any terrible personal trainer, you lift weights for a year and a half. You think you're ready to train everyone, but I eventually got pretty good. And then I learned about drug-free bodybuilding.
So you've been competing since 2006 in drug-free bodybuilding. Talk to us a little bit about your introduction to your first shows. How did they go? What did you learn? Carry on until you sort of went pro with the PNBA in 2011. Maybe even touch on comparing your physique sort of then when you were pro to now.
Yeah.
How much you've improved and what you might attribute that to.
Yeah, and the funny thing, my first competition in 06 was actually a powerlifting meet. It was a push-pull. So from the start, an interesting thing about me is that I've always been just as interested in strength as I was in bodybuilding. They were the same. So I was training deadlift, squats, bench press, and then doing volume work, and I had always was splitting them up. And my first competitive bodybuilding shows were in 07. So my first season was 07 in bodybuilding, and I did an unsanctioned push-pull. Just wasn't a part of any affiliation in 06, and so that was my entrance. I was basically a little more than 2 years into training, did a powerlifting meet, and I was like, oh, that's awesome. And around the same time, I went to a show, it was the INBF Iron Eagle, that Rodney Hilaire, who's a heavyweight WNBF world champ from back in the day, was putting on, and I got to be a test judge. The way it works in INBF, WNBF is, if you're someone who could potentially be a judge, you have to score 80% in line with the judging panel, and then you can become a judge. So I got to test judge, and I learned about natural bodybuilding. I saw the winner, and he looked amazing, and I was like, that's what I want to do. I want to become a WNBF pro. We moved back to California, and then like you said, I competed in 07, I competed in 2009, and then I competed in 2011. And in 2011, I won, and there's a lot of drug-free bodybuilding federations in the States. Too many, if I'm honest. Right, so I've competed with the NGA, National Gym Association. I've competed with INBF, WNBF, obviously. I've competed with INBA and their pro division PNBA. I have not competed with, but I did get qualified in 2011. So in my third competitive season, I competed in the Nevada State, and I actually won that show. It was very small, and I did get pro qualified. There was 2 divisions, lightweight, heavyweight, and I think there was 3 in the heavies and maybe 4 in the lights. It was for the PNB, it's tall and short, or tall and medium. And I ended up winning the overall there. The guy who I was going up against in the overall, I think he had a more muscular and leaner physique than me, but he was so green that he didn't know how to display it. Right. So he was pinching his shoulders on the back of the bicep. He was sticking his butt out, so you couldn't even see the striations. And I edged him out for the win because he didn't present himself like a professional. So my physique at this stage, I'll be honest, I was insecure about, because I was 6 foot, kind of lanky. I didn't have the classic bodybuilder structure. I didn't have the size. Early on, I had, quick gains, but then they tapered off. And I started to realize how much of like a dog and pony show bodybuilding is, that it's all about broad shoulders, tiny waist,
right.
Hip structure, bone structure. And I realized, like, I'm not 5'9", and I don't have a boat for a rib cage, and I kind of have relatively narrow shoulders, at least for bodybuilding. So I've got to do everything in my power to just get every advantage I can. So I was an avid person who practices posing, and I always made sure after my first season, 2007, that I was going to come in shape. So I pulled off that win because of my posing and the fact that I maximized what I had on the day. But I knew that pro qualification was turning pro, And in the States, and this is no shade on anyone who has a PNBA Pro Card. In the States, it's not like a lot of the international PNBA, INBA affiliates, where you typically have to qualify for nationals, go to nationals, win nationals to get a pro card, or then qualify for the Natural Olympia. In the States, if you win a big enough show in the overall, and big enough is not that big. Like I said, I think there was a total of 7 bodybuilders in the show that I won.
Wow.
You can get a pro card, and then you can compete as a pro in pro shows. But around this time in 2011, it was the year before I moved to New Zealand and started my graduate work at AUT, doing my second master's and my PhD. And I knew I wasn't going to compete during that, because that was too important to me. And the thing about graduate work is it's not just studying for yourself, you're conducting research. And in sports science, you're conducting research that should benefit the community, other athletes, coaches, and help them, do what they do better and in a healthier way. So I didn't want to sacrifice that at all. So I knew I wasn't going to compete for years. So I was like, okay, cool. This is a good closing chapter, but I knew I was going to come back. And in the meantime, I was going to build and come back really looking the part of a pro, hopefully.
So you touched briefly on a research fellow here in New Zealand at AUT.
Yeah.
Your research sort of centers around physique and strength sports, specifically training and nutrition. Talk to us a little bit about how you feel with regards to studies versus anecdotal evidence in strength sports and bodybuilding, and how you do a bit of speaking work at academic and fitness industry conferences and things like that. Talk to us a bit about that sort of work that you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So early on, I was probably more appreciated for my intellectual contributions to the sport than I was as an athlete. The funny thing is people might see me as like the science guy first, but in my core, I'm always an athlete first, and that's never changed. Because once I got bit by that bug, that was a strong marriage in my soul with the iron. Mm-hmm. And that is always what comes first. So when I first got interested in the science of bodybuilding, it was because I wasn't getting the gains I wanted to be better. So it first started very inwardly focused. And then once I started to get kudos, and I was a personal trainer and I was helping people and I got better at that, it became my craft, my intellectual pursuit, and I had a connection to the sport now through science. And so for me, it was my anecdotal drive as an athlete of trying to figure out what to do better, and not necessarily being satisfied with the answers that I would get from asking people in the bodybuilding.com forums or reading what pros are doing in the magazines, where I was like, first I want to ask better questions and I want to have more sure answers. Because you can ask the same thing and 10 different people will tell you 10 different things are the best.
That's right.
Anecdotes and science go hand in hand. And it's like a continual relay race where we know what works. The thing about an anecdote, if a bunch of pro level bodybuilders are telling you, we all do this, and this is how we succeeded. There's a saying, success leaves clues. And it's not that success leaves answers, it's success leaves clues. Because what you know from an anecdote, if a bunch of pros are doing that, it is not preventing them from succeeding. But you can't know that what they're doing isn't just good enough for them to succeed, or it's not preventing them from winning, right? But how do we know it's the best? We can't. You simply can't, and that's just the way logic works. What if there's another reality where they're doing that, but they slightly tweak it and it's better? What if they're good despite what they're doing? and it's their genetics, or in the IFBB, their drug protocol is better and their training's actually not that good. There's so many variables we can't know. So in my mind, what you do is you take what's going on anecdotally, and that gives you your clues, and then you go, right, let's take all these possibilities, let's take these potential pathways to getting better, and let's test them. Let's bring them into the lab. Let's do applied research, and then we can refine it even more. And then we pass that baton back to the athletes and the coaches. They go, hey, try this. Let me know how it works. How would you put this into the field? And then they try it out and they go, yeah, this worked, this didn't work. This worked in the lab, but it doesn't quite fit into someone's lifestyle. And then we refine, and they pass us the baton back. So anytime someone positions it as it's bro science versus science, or experience versus research, I think that's a real missed opportunity to see how they synergize, and you really should be leaning on both.
So you mentioned a little earlier that people know you as the science guy, so I just wanted to touch on people know you from 3DMJ and mass. Give us a bit of background as to how they came about. So you started 3DMJ, one of the co-founders and the chief science officers, way back in 2009. What does that entail for you? How has it evolved over time? Touch on, I know you were late on social media, but what are the goals now for 3DMJ going forward? And for the Mass Research Review, what is it? The content you create, it's disseminated all around the world. For those not familiar with it, what is Mass and what are your goals for it? I know that's a lot of questions. Give it a go, man.
Absolutely. So 3D Muscle Journey was formed backstage in 2009, coinciding with my now colleague and partner, Jeff Albert's return to the sport. When I first got into competing, I was very, very driven. You can understand based upon the kind of connection I had being bitten by the bug. And I was too focused on the outcome and too focused on trying to win and too obsessive about the process. And it was a negative in terms of my marriage, in terms of my mental health. And I would say that in 2007, bodybuilding, it did a lot to build my self-confidence and teach me that I knew how to work hard. But it also did a lot of negative things, and I wanted to make it a more positive experience, but I didn't know how. So in 2009, when I watched Jeff Albert's return after a 3-year, what he thought would be a permanent retirement, where he was focused on the same things but got burnt out, and came back at 38 with the mindset of I'm in this for the journey, 3D muscle journey. And I'm not just here to win, I'm here to represent myself, the 3Ds, dedication, desire, discipline, and enjoy the process and focus on the journey, not the outcome. And that was the year, after so many years of trying, that he won his NGA and WNBF Pro Card. Wow. And we saw how many people, at least at the time, it wasn't quite as global, our mindset, it was focused on California. And in California, that's where bodybuilding was born. We think of it that way. If you think about the Venice Beach and Arnold, and even before them, Steve Reeves in the Hollywood era, natural bodybuilding actually kind of started in the East Coast. That was where that really started a bastion and a stronghold, and the organization started in the 80s. But there was only a few shows on the West Coast, and natural bodybuilding was small and heavily influenced by what the enhanced guys and gals were doing. So some of the stuff you see backstage, people just dehydrating themselves, pushing themselves really hard, dieting for very short-term periods and crash dieting, and not having the assistance and the chemical needs to do those things, and suffering for it. So we were trying to create an organization that would provide information and also highlight the natural athletes. So it didn't start as a coaching business. We did coaching because we needed to subsidize what we wanted to do, which was interview people, give shine to athletes, put them on our website, start a YouTube channel, do Q&As, and educate people. But I came in as the young kind of science guy. I was the career personal trainer who was doing his bachelor's, and I very quickly stepped into that role. So I completed my bachelor's, I think in 2009 or 2010, did my first master's in 2011, and in 2012, I had the opportunity to pursue a PhD, and I finally had the self-confidence that I could do it. And that's when the opportunity arose at AUT to come out, do my MPhil, Master's of Philosophy, get into the PhD program, finish that, and take that whole career arc. And that was a big deal, leaving California where we had this robust community of 3DMJ around us. So 3DMJ became like a second family. It became a community that we'd fostered around the journey and also dedication, desire, and discipline. So it was not focused on the outcome, yet we were showing people that with this focus on evidence-based practice and a community-oriented, effort-based value system, our athletes were winning. Some prominent athletes at the time that really kind of blew up our scene, for example, on the powerlifting side, was Bryce Lewis. He was making some noise early in his career in some of the local federations. And he went on to become a world champion who I coached. I was, very proud to do so. Matt Ogus, kind of one of the first YouTube sensations. I had the pleasure of working with him, and then Kevin Riley, Robbie Sardinia, Eric Holm. We had a lot of folks who were doing very well in the amateur and pro ranks in the local scene, and some of them who were very prominent online. And that really kind of exploded our business. And we started to become more of a online coaching business than we were like this platform for teaching people. All of a sudden, I'm like, wow, I can go anywhere in the world to study. And I was trying to find a place where I could do applied research in strength and physique sport, and that was not a thing, at least not in the States. Everything was a little more diabetes focused or clinical or stopped at the master's level. So I was looking for a location anywhere, because I was making money online, to where I could study bodybuilding and powerlifting. And when I connected with Professor John Cronin at AUT, who's a mentor to me throughout my academic career, he was like, yeah, we can make that work. You have $4,000 New Zealand to do it. We got these new Millennium Labs up on the North Shore. Bring your wife out, bring your cats out. We'll make you all Kiwis, and you're going to get in the lab, and we're going to study some protein. Figure out what happens when you manipulate protein intake and you diet some strength athletes and bodybuilders. And when you do your PhD, you can study autoregulation and periodization. And I was like, this is amazing. And I remember, it was a turning point in my life, and I'm incredibly grateful for it. To be here means a lot to me. And last year, my wife and I actually got our New Zealand citizenship. So this goes to show you how much pride I have in being here.
Man.
Thank you. And it means a lot. I have a very, very deep connection to New Zealand, and it's an honor to be competing here, helping people here, and being a part of AUT. After I graduated in 2017 with my PhD, I got hired on as a research fellow. And actually this year I got promoted to senior research fellow. And all that I do at AUT is I supervise master's and PhD students who are interested in doing the same thing. So it's paying it forward, it's making sure the ladder's down so that I can help the next generation of scientists and science communicators contribute to our community of lifters so that we have healthier practices and ways to improve performance. And I do that in other ways too. You mentioned mass research review. A big part of being a science communicator is not just communicating the science you do, but actually helping people understand all the research that's done. So there are literally hundreds of journals in exercise science, sports science, nutrition science, coaching psychology, health, and these studies themselves are not written, even though they should be, for the general populace, coaches, practitioners to understand. They're written for the scientific community to peer review, and then somebody has to disseminate it. That falls on the shoulders of people who kind of walk in both worlds like myself. I coached full-time all the way up till 2014, 2015, when I just didn't have the time anymore to do my PhD. And now I only coach a handful of athletes, no more than 5. I used to coach like 40 at my peak. And I did that for a good 5 or 6 years. And before that, I was a personal trainer for 3 or 4 years. So I have a lot of coaching experience. And now I do part-time coaching for 3DMJ. But primarily, my job is to make sure the other coaches and the rest of our staff are up to date with the best evidence. And I also do that for the wider community through MASS, which is a monthly research review that I do with Dr. Eric Trexler, Dr. Mike Zerdos, by the way, competitive powerlifter and coach, or used to be, competitive bodybuilder, still a current coach, and also Lauren Colenso Semple, who is, all of them have PhDs or are getting their PhDs in the area, and they work in training, and they're strength and physique sports specialists. So we, every month, and have since 2017, we put out issues. We take the most relevant research that came out that month, and then we communicate it to the community and the subscribers so that they can put it into practice in layman's terms. So that's Mass Research Review. That's my time at AUT, and then that's what I do with 3DMJ. So I try to really utilize my skill set in a way that has the biggest impact on the community that I can.
That's a great answer. So I just want to segue very quickly into, you said you're a person that sort of walks in both worlds. From a personal perspective, one of the things I want to talk to you and that I'm interested to talk to you about is your super impressive run of WNBF shows this year. For those that don't know, you did multiple shows back to back to back to back with the goal of achieving pro status in the WNBF. So why the WNBF? Talk to us about the prep, how far out you started. Did you do any direct cardio work? Were you just keeping track of steps? Talk to us about your diet breaks, your refeeds, peaking strategies, and what was it like doing that many shows back to back?
Yeah, man. So why the WNBF? It's because I feel that, every federation is a little different, and ultimately the natural bodybuilding community is bigger than any federation. But the federation where I choose to compete, where I think it has the most pros and the least cons, is the World Natural Bodybuilding Federation. And it has, I think, the most international affiliates, and it has a legitimate world championship that's coming up in Seattle. This is the 34th year they've had world championships. And the reason why I like the WNBF is because they are very serious about providing a level playing field and a good competitive experience. And it's a highly competitive organization. So I mentioned that I kind of won my PNBA Pro qualification in a relatively small show. You simply can't do that in the WNBF. Each international affiliate's a little different, but in the States, for example, there needs to be at least 8 in the open division. And if you win the overall in an open division of at least 8, you can get pro status. There's also sometimes what's called super pro qualifiers in the States, where if there's 8 in a class, you can get your pro card. So Worlds will be like that, for example. I've done a couple shows that are super pro qualifiers. With the international affiliates, it is a little different. It's based upon how big the show is, how long the federation's been around. And the reason why, again, I want to compete the WNBF is because of that caliber of competition, right, but also because to get on stage, every single athlete has to take a polygraph for 10-year drug-free status. And you sit there, you read through the banned substance list, and then you have a polygrapher who gives you 20-minute to an hour long, depending on how many times I got to run you through it, polygraph to assess whether you can step on stage. And then once you step on stage, if you do get your pro card as an amateur, then you're urine tested. And that pro status is held until you actually pass your urine test. And then in the pros, same thing. Everyone who wants to get on stage, polygraphed. And then if you win money, same thing. So that kind of commitment to testing, it does cost more money. Like you got to drop 130 NZ just to pay the polygraph on top of your entry fee and hotel and pictures and everything. It's cheaper than drugs though, kids. So
stay off the drugs.
That's right. Say no to drugs. Me and Nancy Reagan, we're going to do a tour. But no, in all seriousness, like I have no disrespect towards people who take the enhanced route. I just know for me, because of my philosophy behind it and what I get from bodybuilding and my connection, I want to go the drug-free route. And I'm really pleased that there is a viable route for drug-free athletes. And I think the most level playing field with the highest competitive level is the WNBF. So that's why. And I've had a dream ever since the beginning to compete in the WNBF. I'm going to show my age here, but before the internet, not before the internet, but before social media, there was a magazine that the INBF owned called Natural Bodybuilding and Fitness Magazine. And the way you'd find out information and also see who won shows was in magazines. You had Flex Magazine, I'm talking 2005. I'm at Borders or Barnes & Nobles in the States, our biggest booksellers. There's Flex Magazine, Ronnie Coleman's on the cover, just won the 05 Olympia, awesome. Just 2 spots over, Natural Bodybuilding and Fitness Magazine, and you got Jim Cordova or Brian Whitaker or Clarence McGill, someone, and if you know who those guys are. Sean Clarita, actually, the current 212, or actually a multiple-time 212 Mr. Olympia champion.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, you should know him. He was actually the lightweight world champion multiple times and battled out for the overall. Kai Green, I don't know if you heard of that guy, second place in the Olympia, maybe an uncrowned Mr. Olympia. He actually, as a teenager, won pro shows in the WNBF, just to kind of show you the caliber. So I remember seeing these guys on the cover of Natural Bodybuilding and Fitness Magazine, and they have all the results in the back. You can still find some magazines from 2009, and you can see me winning some amateur weight classes. Not quite the pro card back then, but the magazine era died away, but that connection I had never went away, and I always wanted to become a WNBF pro. So I've competed so many times at the WNBF. I had a run at a lot of their shows in 2009, as well as 2019, and I have been the bridesmaid so many times. I've placed second or first and then lost in the overall, I think maybe 6 times.
Jeez.
Yeah, so I got into 2 overalls in 2009, Jeff Alberts was also in those, so that wasn't my day. I got second place to the overall winner in '09 in the very last show I did. And then in 2019, I placed second in the first show I did. I won the next show I did, but it was too small, didn't have 8 to give a pro card in the INBF. And then I placed second in the third show I did in 2019. And then this year, 2023, I had, like you said, a really good run. The first show that I did, I actually judged that last year, and that's the WNBF New Zealand Aotearoa Elite Naturals. Really good show, but it is the start of WNBF New Zealand. It's never been here before. It's not as entrenched as things like the INBA or ICN. And so it's a small show, and the way that we had established the rules, which I think, we're moving away from that moving forward, but it's kind of the way you have to start, is okay, if you have the numbers that we talked about, there's a pro card, but if not, then an international panel that's watching the live stream decides, is the person pro caliber? So I actually was very fortunate to win the title. I won the bodybuilding overall. I won the open bodybuilding. There's only one class, again, small, but then I went up against the teen and the novice and I won that. But because of the size of the show, the panel decided no pro card. So it's a huge honor. I mean, I'm only the second person who's won that title. The other one's Rhoda Elliott, who's a very lauded and accoladed natural bodybuilder. Yeah, and he's also in his 40s. He's gone to PNBA pro caliber level shows and done very well. I think he's placed in the Natural Olympia. He's the man. He's one of the best natural bodybuilders in New Zealand. So to be right there with him winning the same show, it's a huge honor. But then, my job this season, I was like, you know what? I'm going to really, even though it's about the journey, I'm going to let the competitive Eric out of the back. And I'm going to make a push very hard to try to get my pro card. So I went to the States and I did 2 more shows. So I immediately left right after the New Zealand show in Christchurch, and I went to go compete in the Battle of the Bay in the Bay Area in California. And then the next weekend, Jeff and I drove up to the Washington State. And it was very, very tight. So it was a big 7-person middleweight class that I was in at Battle of the Bay. The top 4 middleweights were all 3DMJ clients, or me. I guess I'm a 3DMJ client. But so Lorenzo Elder actually won that and then went on to win the overall. So I placed second to the overall winner once again. And it was an extremely tight decision. That middleweight class, in bodybuilding, for those who don't know, they will move you around to make comparisons, and they keep the people they think are in the top spot in the center. And just by virtue of our numbers, Lorenzo and I were in the middle of the 7-person class, and everyone else got moved around us. And I was sitting there going, oh shit, I'm either first or second. I didn't get moved a single time, and neither did Lorenzo. And Lorenzo is good. So he is already an NGA pro. He's actually won NGA pro shows. And he had just done INBF show a few weeks back, or maybe a month ago, and he wasn't quite in top shape, and I think he placed second. So he had gotten in fantastic shape. I had also gotten in pretty damn good shape, and it was really tooth and nail. And I don't know if it was a 1-point decision or if I got a few first place nods, but we were the only 2 didn't get moved, and I ended up in second. So, and then we had 2 more 3DMJ athletes. It was a very, very competitive middleweights, and it was an honor to be up there, but I was just that close once again. 2 shows in a row where I got as close as you possibly could to a pro card without winning it. You win the show, don't get the panel decision, you place second to the pro winner. The next show we would do, Jeff and I, we drove up from Cali to Washington over 2 days. We had a great time together. The Washington State is a cool story because that's where Jeff got his pro card in 2009. I won the lightweight class. This is one of the overalls I got into, and he won the overall. So he beat me as well as everybody else, got his pro card, and we were coming back to that show 14 years later, which was a really, really cool experience. So that was a good show, but man, that was the most competitive middleweight class, even though I just did a really competitive one the week prior. I won the Masters, which was the first time competing in the Masters division, which was cool. And then I placed third in that division. So that middleweight class was really tough. A gentleman from Hong Kong flew out with just the most insane legs I've seen. Ace Fuming Chong. So big shout out to you, man. And then in second place was Ryan B., who was already a pro, but in men's physique, and he was trying to get his bodybuilding card. So he had an incredible physique as well. And then behind me was Josh Bradshaw in fourth, who was a very, very good amateur. And man, I tell you what, that top 4, if you look at the pictures, it's like, shit, I guess we have to give somebody second, third, and fourth. But it was a very, very, very tight class. So yeah, I think Ace had the best physique out of us, and he deservedly won. And he didn't even win the overall. That was a really competitive show. The lightweight winner, very, very impressive, totally diced. And I knew that I could get a little tighter. So the way I was peaking, since that was one of your questions, was I dieted all the way starting on February 4th, and the New Zealand show was September 30th. So I started around 96 kilos, like a bloated 96. I dropped to like 94 within a week. And then I dieted all the way down to, I was around 80 when I got on stage in New Zealand. And then I just dropped half a kilo or a bit. I think the lowest weigh-in I've seen this prep is in the low 78s, which is the lowest I've ever been. But this is also the leanest I've ever been. So the way I did that was I did kind of like a mid-load. So what that means is we carbohydrate load in bodybuilding to fill out our muscles because we store glycogen in them. But in the process of carb loading, you also tend to look a little puffy and water retaining just because of all the fluids and the fact that carbohydrates are osmotic. They draw water with them, which is why you look fuller. But you need some time for your water balance to restabilize. So I was basically taking my normal refeed days or my high days where I wasn't dieting. I had 5 low days, 2 high days on the weekends. And I just shifted them back and made the first one a little higher and the second one a little lower. And I did that on the Thursday, Friday. And then I would compete on the Saturday because overnight you tend to clean up and you look better. And it worked really well. And because I still had those low days leading into it, and on the day of the show, I really don't eat very much at all. Just a little bit of carbohydrate that's salty, and I keep my water flowing nice and high, and I look great. I can pump up. I'm actually in a mild deficit on game day as long as I don't go out and party and eat. And when you're locked in and you got to keep competing, you need to stay focused. It's not time to celebrate yet. The job isn't done. I was in a small deficit after each show on Saturday, and then I had the Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday low days, and I repeated that both times. So for the Washington State after New Zealand, the Battle of the Bay after New Zealand, and the Washington State after the Battle of the Bay. And after that, wasn't pro yet, so I still had another one lined up. Came home, and I was 2 weeks out from the WNBF Australia. And this isn't the first time WNBF has been in Australia, but it's had a few false starts over the year. Actually, now I'm really confident in it. Sebastian he comes from Taiwan. He moved with his wife back to Australia, where she's originally from, and he connected with WNBF Taiwan, who puts on the biggest shows in the WNBF. They've had 2 nearly 400-person shows that they put on. Got a ton of help from Team WNBF Taiwan. Shout out to them. Also Simon Collins, and he came out. He's the president of WNBF New Zealand to help them judge. So it was a really nice Asia Pacifica collaboration to put on the WNBF Australia show. And for a first annual show for the new WNBF affiliate, they crushed it. They had nearly 100 competitors. I want to say there was 89 or something like that, which is a sizable show. And so there's definitely enough for not only 1 pro card, but 2. And I'll get to that in a moment. But I had 2 weeks before this one, and I knew that I needed to get a little bit tighter, and then I would have the best chance because I wasn't quite as lean as I was in 2019, even though I'd improved my physique in the off season. I'd brought up my lats, I'd brought up my delts, and I mentioned I have a narrow frame, and that was a critical piece for my physique. It really made me finally look balanced, symmetrical, and like a bodybuilder more than I did when I got I kind of snuck in and stole the pro card back in 2011. So now with those 2 weeks, I just ran low days all the way through and then peaked in the end. And we loaded a little harder and brought it a day forward. So instead of Thursday, Friday, we ate a lot more on Wednesday, moderate amount on Thursday, moderate amount on Friday, and then just held steady on game day. And that was the best peak I've ever had. I was hard as nails. I was peaked out of my mind. Alberto Nunez, he's the one who collaborates with me and is like my coach. And I was just like, dude, you landed this plane perfectly. So I was as shredded as I've ever been, if not more so. I'd hit the peak or equaled my peak in conditioning. I had the best physique I ever had, and I also had the best peak I've ever had. And I knew that I was doing everything I could on the day, and it ended up going very well for me. So I competed in the Masters, and similarly to New Zealand, because of the first year of the Australia show, the judging panel themselves, not an external panel, but the judging panel, because it was quite good, quite robust, and they have a lot of good judges in Australia, pulling from ICN, a lot of experienced coaches, some other WNBF pros. They got to make the decision when there was too small of a division to when they wanted to award a pro card. And also, they have a unique system. Instead of having a super pro qualifier, if they have over 8, they have the opportunity to award a second pro card in a division. Right. If someone the judging panel decides is pro-worthy. I won the Masters. It was a very competitive Masters. Big shout out to Arash. He's actually an ANBA and PNBA pro. He took second to me in the Masters. It was very tight. We got moved around, but I ended up winning, and it wasn't a big enough class for a pro card, but the panel decided that I was pro-worthy. So I got what's called a Masters Pro Card. And that was a huge moment, but a Masters Pro Card only enables you to compete in the Masters Pros, and not to take anything away from them, but I wanted to compete in the Open. Even though I'm 40, I'm like, you know what, most pros are in their 30s, 40s, or 50s in natural bodybuilding. We have a long competitive lifespan. So my dream is to compete in the Open Pros. It's the most competitive division. So that was awesome. It was amazing. And then I went right into it wasn't lightweights, but they split us. The cutoff was right at 80 kilos, which is what my weigh-in was. I was the heaviest of the first weight class. And then there was the over 80 kilo class. So I won that class as well. And that was a really competitive class. Alex Connor placed third. He's a really, really good bodybuilder from Australia. Arash, again, placed second to me. He entered the Open and the Masters like I did. Even in fourth, there's a gentleman named Ian. He looks awesome. He's done some damage in the ICN as a classic physique competitor, or sorry, I should say classic bodybuilding competitor. So all five of those guys were amazing. But I won that title, and I knew, oh man, I'm going to the overall. And they kept announcing, hey, if the judging panel decides, we have 2 pro cards we can award. And I was like, wow, I've got a really good shot here. Even if I don't win the overall, they might be able to award me my pro card. I could feel the emotion welling up all the years I've been trying, and the insecurities I had around my physique, and then my prior pro card, it wasn't legit. So I was just trying to keep it together because I knew I was on, and I knew this was, if I had a chance, this was it. So I went to the overall, and I went up against a guy named Muhammad, and he had just crushed it at ICN. He'd crushed it even in the IFBB show as a men's physique competitor. I think he placed second or third, and this guy's a mountain of muscle. And he'd been getting in better and better shape. And maybe if he was off, I could have beat him. But he wasn't as lean as me, but he was lean enough. And he has tiny waist, big X-frame, and just a much more muscular guy than I was. So I think I gave him a good run. I gave him a good fight. But he deservedly won the overall, got his pro card. And then they had to figure out, well, all right, who's the second best bodybuilder in the show? There's 2 guys who Muhammad's beat. There's the 80-plus second place winner, and then there's me, who he beat in the overall. So they brought out Lawrence Greaves, who took second in the heavies. And he's also a very, very good bodybuilder. Incredibly, he's only 23. He's done some damage as well in the ICN ranks coming up. He's had an awesome season. And we then had another overall. So I got compared like back to back to back to back to back. But my peak held, and I ended up coming out on top, and I got my WNBF Pro Card.
Congrats, man.
Thank you. And it was I'm still trying to make sense of it, because I've been trying to get this it's been on my list of goals since I went to that show and test judged in 2006. So there's 17 years of desire that came out, and me working diligently and consistently and not being sure that I'd ever be able to do it, and having insecurity around my physique. So to kind of have that monkey off my back, it's been a huge blessing. And what's crazy to me is that qualified me in the professional division for Worlds. So I'm now a week out from the most competitive show in natural bodybuilding in the most competitive division. And for a natural bodybuilder, it's like qualifying for the Olympics. So I've already feel like I've won, and it's something that I'm just trying to take it in, because I didn't know that I would ever get here.
I just want to say, man, like when I first decided that we were bringing the show back for a second season, one of the people at the top of my list was to get you back on. So I just want to say a massive thank you on behalf of myself, but also tens of thousands of people that you've influenced, impacted, and formed all around the world through the work that you do. I want to say good luck for Worlds in Washington. I'm sure we want to get you back on to talk to you more. I've got more questions. We want to hear about Worlds when you get back. Thank you, Dr. Eric Helms.
No, thank you, Chris. I greatly appreciate it. And just want to say it's an honor and a privilege, and I think you're doing great stuff with this.